Hey, what's going on, folks? I'm your host, Mike P of the FPC Virtual Channel, and we are going live. Now, you are noticing and seeing an actual 3D animated face doing some weird stuff. Just moving its face, making some sort of gesture, and it's in a loop. So I did a very short animation on Blender a little while back. It was actually version 2.81, the beta version, and I'm currently running Blender 2.82, the alpha version. So it's the latest release that's out there that I'm going to be covering today. I'm doing some animation fun because I like to, have fun with animation, play around, and see what I can come up with. I'm just experimenting and doing whatever that comes to my mind. So I think this is going to be interesting for y'all folks who are out there in the community, online, on the internet, on YouTube, or whatever the case may be. So let's go and try to move away from this. Let me minimize this media source and then jump into Blender 2.8. So I haven't really covered too much about Blender 2.8. It's the actually Blender 2.82, I should say. So I haven't really covered much about it. It's the brand new features that are released in an experimental version for Blender 2.8, actual Blender 2.82 alpha. I keep getting it kind of mixed up because I'm used to using Blender 2.8 itself and not the 8.1 or the 8.2 version for alpha or beta versions. So this is the screen that you see on the intro. You get the options to change your setup for quick setup. You got shortcuts, left, right, click, select. So whatever you want your default left click or right click mouse to be defaulted to. You got spacebar. Mine's is set to play. I like it to be set there. So when you hit the spacebar, it will actually try to play an animation. So I just wanted to talk about that because that's what I'm going to be using here instead of hitting the little play button here on the toolbar at the bottom. I'm going to be using my keyboard, so you can do that as well. And I'm going to try to do some fun stuff starting out. Instead of just doing mouth and head motions, I'm going to do some basics without having to use any armature or any bones, so y'all folks can see how simple it is to play around with animations on Blender. And we're going to play with the cube. So let's hit the left click mouse button, and that will send that intro screen away. And then what you can do, or they also call it the splash screen, you can use your left click mouse button to select if you chose the left as a default, and you can select the viewport in terms of navigation, so you can rotate the viewport. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just playing around with my left click mouse button, rotating the screen. The reason why I'm doing that, I want y'all folks who are brand new to Blender to think about the possibilities of what you can do in terms of playing with 3D view. So whatever view that you choose to position your screen, you can play around with it and you can create differing perspectives, differing views of your 3D objects and environments as well. You can create really dope environments. Now, my skills is minimal. It's not the best. I'm not the greatest 3D artist or 3D modeler. I'm actually a student still, so bear with me if I make any errors in what I'm trying to do. But pretty much I'm having fun with it, so I don't have to be that skilled to have fun with Blender. All I have to do is understand the viewport to some degree and some of the basic controls. So I'm not going to try to teach y'all folks too much right now. I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now with this cube, we have at the very bottom the toolbar for the timeline. The timeline is your controls pretty much for playing your animations. So you can go down to the bottom of the screen, you can leave it all the way at the bottom, or you can zoom it up or scroll it up, I should say, by left click, using the left click mouse button and then pulling it up wherever you see this arrow, see this up and down arrow. So once you do that, you can start to see what's going on with your timeline. If you don't do that, it's going to pretty much be down at the bottom of the screen, and all you can do is hit the play button. But when you do that, all you're going to see, you're not going to be able to see what's going on in your timeline. You're just going to see numbers moving here, and that number would be the current frame. So with any animation, if you ever use software for animation, you're going to have what is known as keyframes and frames of reference from a starting point to an ending point. So that's what you see here, where it says start and it says end in the timeline area to the right of the screen of the toolbar. So if I move it up, you'll get to notice that the time frame went from 0 to 161. So what does that number indicate? That number basically indicates what frame we're on. So we're on the 161st frame in time. So if we hit the back arrow or the rewind button, it will send it back in time to the 1 second or 1 frame, the actual 1 frame on the timeline. So when we hit the play, you'll see it move. And this is also known as a playhead. So now it's moving in time, and we have no kind of animations stored in the timeline. So you're not going to see any animations right now because there's 0 animations stored in there. So the cube is actually not moving, it's not doing anything. And we did not choose to create what is known as keyframes. Now when you do animation in any animation software, you have to actually tell the software where you want your frame to be stored. And what it does is it's taking screenshots of the actual motion. So whatever you choose to do with the animation, it basically is a motion of your 3D object. So you're moving your 3D object from one point to the next point, or you're rotating it, or you're scaling it, stuff like that. And so you have tools that give you that ability to manipulate it. So you have on Blender, you have on the left side a toolbar. So we have the option to select box. Up here we have the option to tweak the box, or tweak the object I should say. We can object select it through select box. We can select it through select circle. We could use a lasso as well. But I think it's smart to use the first one just starting out. If you brand new to Blender, I highly recommend for you to use the tweak option, because the other options will be more like for advanced users and stuff like that, especially select lasso. So just go to tweak and try to play with that and see what it does. So basically you can go to your object, your 3D object, and you can move it around when you're on tweak. If you're on select box, you can't do that. You can't move it. Instead, you're actually choosing to select areas of the object using a box selection mode. So right now what it will do is just select the entire box. See that? So that's why I say it's really, really crucial to start out with tweak, so you can start to learn how to move your objects around. Once you learn how to move your object around, now you can start to play around and create what is known as keyframes and animatable frames, pretty much. So you'll start to see the keyframes, and they're indicated by little tiny dots, and these dots look like yellowish orange, or like this highlighted box here. See, the highlight is in like kind of orange highlight. So that's what you're going to see with the keyframes. So there's really cool ways to do keyframes. There's multiple ways to do it, but the easiest way is to select this option here that says auto keying, which is an automatic keyframe insertion for objects and bones. So you can animate objects without having bones, or you can animate objects that have bones inserted inside of them. And animatable bones will basically also have a higher level control, sometimes known as an armature. So you can use an armature to control all the parts or multiple related subparts of a 3D object. So it can be any object shape, it can be any object form and contour design that you chose to create, or maybe to move onto Blender, and then you can pretty much animate them. So this is the stuff that I learned how to do, how to play with, and it took me some time to figure it out. But basically, if you learn the beginning part of how the timeline functions, then it becomes much easier, as well as you add that basics to the timeline to the basics of mobility or maneuverability of your 3D viewport. So when you can rotate the 3D viewport when you can play around, when you can manipulate your objects by moving the objects around, now you have the ability to create the animations. So without doing that, you'll be on ground zero or square one. You wouldn't be able to do anything in terms of manipulation. So I just wanted y'all folks to see that so you can at least go somewhere with it. So let's go undo. I'm going to undo a bunch of times so I can take my 3D object back to the center point. Now, another way to do that, to rewind and take it back to the center point, say your 3D object was all the way over here in the 3D view, and you want to get it into the origin, which is the 0, 0, 0 position on the screen, or 0 in the X, Y, and Z coordinate plane. So what you want to do is use your shift key. So you tap your shift key and hold it on your keyboard and hit the S key. That will give you an easier way to get to it. So these pie menus pop up on the screen, and then you can just go to where it says cursor to world origin, or you can hit the 1 key and it should send it there. Actually, make sure your cursor is in the world origin first. Then you do it again, so shift S, and then you go cursor, actually selected or selection to cursor. So you hit the 8 key or you select that, and it will take it straight to the cursor. So I did make a little error in the beginning. Like I said, I'm not the best at this stuff, but that's pretty much how it works. So say your 3D cursor, you can select it here in the toolbar, and say your 3D cursor is all the way over here, and your object, hold on one second, let me go back to the tweak option, and your object is over here. If you try to do it now, it's going to send the object to the 3D cursor. It won't send it to the origin. So we do shift S, and then don't do cursor to world origin because it's not going to actually show you the error that I wanted you to see. You do selection to cursor, and now the selection goes up here. So that's why I made the error by telling you the wrong way to do it when I first started out talking about it. So what we're going to do is do cursor to world origin. Let's do that again. And then we'll do object selection to cursor. Boom. So now it's in the dead center. That's how it starts out. So let's play around and create some basic animations. So what we want to do is take the keyframe or the playhead, and we want to drag it over to the 0 position. So we can just take it and drag it, or we can click over here in the 0 position. Now it may not work right away because you haven't been in the actual timeline, so sometimes it doesn't work right away. So what you probably have to do is hit the play button, then pause it, and now you should be able to start selecting. There it goes. So it went back to 0. So now it's in the 1 position. You want it in the 1 position, and you want to actually initiate a keyframe at the 1 position, or else it won't really do any animation. If you try to, say you want to move it to like the 40 frame and try to put an animation keyframe, it won't really animate. So you have to initiate a keyframe. So the best way to do that is to go up to, I believe, let's see, object. You go to object, and then actually we can't do it here. We're gonna have to take the object to, I think we could do it there. Let's see. Animation. So yeah, you go to animation. So I was making a little error with that. You go to animation, then you go to insert keyframe, and then you want to go to lock rot scale. What that means is that it's gonna give an insertion of a keyframe for the location, rotation, and the scale. So you don't have to choose one of these. You can choose all of them at once. And what that does is it initiates a 0 position. So it's telling Blender to position itself for animation and prepare it for the animation that's going to happen next. So say we want to start playing now and go from 0 to 20. And you could look at this as 20 seconds instead of it being keyframes, if you want to think of it that way, because it's actually how much time it's going to take for it to move from one point to the next point, or to actually animate. So say we wanted to move it, use this up, down, and positional arrow looking icon. What that does is give you the ability to manipulate what is known as the gizmo. And that's in the dead center currently, where you see the cursor is, and actually where the object is. You can manipulate that as well. You can change the cursor's position. You can or you can change the gizmo's position. You can change how it rotates, how it moves. You can do a lot of different stuff. But currently it's in the dead center world origin. So say you wanted to move the object there, that's going to create a keyframe if you have this option here for the auto keying selected. If you don't, it won't create a keyframe. So I'm going to use Control Z, back it up, and what we're going to do is make sure we select it. It's going to turn blue. And now that it's automated, so that means everything that I choose to do across the timeline, it will actually create keyframes as soon as I move the object or manipulate it in any way. So say we move the object here, it's going to automatically annotate and put down a keyframe. So now you have that keyframe. So let's move this back into time, and you'll see it's animating in time. Boom. So that's the animation that was created. So that's pretty cool. All right, so we got one animation done. Say I wanted to do more with it besides it just doing a movement like that. Say I wanted to actually go from 1 to 2, and then I wanted to do a duplication of the actual object. So we can use the shift key on the keyboard, hit the D key on the keyboard, and that duplicates the object. Then we're going to hit the G key. The G key actually indicates motion. So say you wanted to move it in a specific position, just hit the G key after you do those two keys that I talked about, and then that stores in on Blender, and it's waiting for you to tell what direction you want to move it. So say I want to move it to the X direction. You hit the X key consecutively after using the G key, and now you can move it in either direction, to the right or to the left. So say I wanted to move it there and just drop it. And let's do another duplication. So we'll do Shift D, hit the G key, then hit the X key, and boom, now we can move it again, another object that comes out of it, or another cube, I should say. So if I didn't like that positioning, I can change it with the gizmo, move it a little bit closer, and I also can look in different dimensionality of using this other gizmo controller here for the viewport, and that gives you the ability to position it accurately how you want it to look in the viewport. So there we go with that. That looks pretty much squared away. And now let's check the animation. So the animation is going to look like that. So now we got objects coming out of it. So let's see it in 3D. So now we'll go back, and it's going to move. See that? Pretty cool. So it moves in an angle, and it actually creates duplicates of itself. So this is the kind of thing that you can play with, and you can have fun just starting out in Blender as a cube. You don't really have to know that much to do all this stuff. So the basics to using the timeline is what you got to get down packed, and then understanding some of the hotkeys like Shift S. So let's do that Shift S again, do a little quick review. Shift S gives you these quick abilities to maneuver the cursor. So you can use the 3D cursor in different ways. And you can also move objects to the 3D cursor, and you can play around with different things like that. You can move the cursor to the world origin, you can do cursor to selected, and this is really, really great once you get further in animation where you want to control bones, and you want to control maybe fingers or joints and stuff like that, and you can rotate on specific axes. So say like this axis that you see here, let's go out of it. Say I wanted to rotate these two objects on this particular axis here. What I could do is do cursor to selected. So I do Shift S, and the cursor will go to the actual object that's selected. So you do cursor to selected. Now it's going to pivot on this actual object's pivot point, but it won't do it yet until you tell it where to pivot at. So I wanted to pivot on the 3D cursor. So I use this option here, go to 3D cursor, and now it will pivot around the 3D cursor. So this will actually rotate around it. So let's play with an animation for that particular purpose. So we take this, move it over here to 100 or maybe 120, and we create a rotation. So what we're going to do is do shift select to select these other objects and get them to rotate around this one. And now we'll use a rotation option here in the tool, and then we'll just do maybe like a rotation like this and land it there, something to that effect. So now let's back up and see what it did. Interesting. So it didn't give me exactly what I thought it was going to give me. It actually gave me something more than what I wanted. So that's pretty dope. So now I created an animation that I never done before, and that's pretty interesting. So what I want to do, let's go back. We're going to do Control Z, back it up, so I can see the positioning of where I actually did it at. And we're going to maneuver it so I can see an exact position of where I want it to land. So we're going to rotate on this axis, the green axis, so it can land right there. Actually, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to level it out right there. Okay, so let's back up the animation and show what it looks like. And you see it does a rotation like that. Pretty cool. So with not much knowledge of animation, I've been able to create that very basic animation. So you can imagine, just take your imagination as far as you can go and think what kind of stuff that you can come up with just using the basics to animation on Blender, and just keep playing around and keep playing around. And day in and day out, the more that you do this stuff, eventually your ability and your skills start to evolve, and then you start to think outside the box and try to come up with even more fun stuff and more stuff. And then eventually you'll have something that people really enjoy or people really like. And we didn't even get into the fact of rendering. Rendering is basically to make that visual look really high quality. So we didn't get into that kind of thing. We didn't get into how to store the animations in terms of rendering out the animation so you can get a product for people to enjoy. So we'll do that in other videos, but for now we're just having fun playing around and enjoying the Blender experience, because that's pretty much what it is. If you don't enjoy it, like, what are you doing with it? I highly recommend for folks who want to have fun with Blender to download it and try it, because that's what they're looking to do. They want to have fun and they want to create something that's pretty awesome for other people to experience. So other than that, let's keep going. So now that you see the animation possibilities with the cube, let's get out of this position. Play that animation one more time just for shits and giggles, and here we go. Pretty interesting what it can do. Blender is pretty phenomenal. So there's a lot of different ways you can make it work. There's a lot of tools that are out there, Blender add-ons that come from third-party developers that can make the experience even much more fun and much more interactive. And there's a lot of things you can do. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna load in a file so I can bypass a lot of the time that it's gonna take to actually make the content for it. And I'm gonna try to find a file that I have on my PC that I've played with some animations on. So I'm not gonna save this because it's really basic. So what I'm gonna do is try to find what I'm talking about. So let's see if we can find it. I didn't have it preloaded and set up for y'all folks, so try to bear with me with this part. Might take me a little while to find it. So let's see, 3D objects. Let's see, go to MakeHuman, and I think I forgot where it was placed at, but it's all good. I'm gonna try to find it anywhere. So let's see, and my throat is kind of scratchy right now, but it's all good. I might have to go to the previous version of Blender to find it because I forgot exactly where I put it at. So I'll do that. I'll run up another version of Blender. Hopefully the computer doesn't freeze. So far the computer's been doing pretty good. So we're gonna go back to Blender 2.80, And I'm just going to see where that file was located so I can pull it up in Blender 2.82 and see how it actually runs, playing around with it and see what it does. So that one is the actual character that you saw when the live stream started. Let me see if I got anybody communicating. It'd be pretty dope to communicate with folks at this time because right now Blender's just running up and nothing else is happening. Make sure my audio's down. Shut this audio down. Sorry about this, folks. What is going on with this volume control? Alright. So, yeah, we're just trying to bring up the screen. Alright, there we go. And that one was called Black China 2. Alright, so this is the character built here. Let's see where it's located. Let's go to Save As. It's in MakeHuman China Animation. Alright, so we'll shut that off. And we'll go to it. So MakeHuman China Animation and Black China 2. Alright, so we're going to open it. And there we go. So this is the character that you saw. And I was playing with the head. And the animation was really, really easy for me to create. Because at one point I was experimenting and I figured out a way to create mouth motion without having an actual mocap controller. So I can do it without having the mocap controller, without having any advanced controls at all. All I have to do is just go down here, grab it, and then start moving the mouth like this with my mouse. So that was some very simple stuff that I learned, and then after that I just started trying to create as much as I could and having fun with the character. So as you can see, here goes my character. I created her. It's a female. She does kind of look like a male because of her hair, but yeah, it's a female. Let me show you how it looks rendered. It's gonna work on the background a little bit, and let me get rid of all of this stuff that you see. So hold on one second. I actually gotta select the camera to get rid of that box, that red dotted box that you see. So we're in pose mode right now, so let me go to object mode, select the camera, and then just select that red dotted box and delete it. Hold on one second, if I can. I want to get rid of that. Or I might have to just get rid of the camera itself. I'm trying to delete it. I don't know why it's not deleting. But pretty much I want to get rid of that because that is like blocking my view. Come on. How do I get rid of that thing? I forgot exactly how to get rid of it. Oh, hold on. Go to view, view region, clear. There we go. All right, so let me bring back the camera. There we go. All right, so I undid it and I brought back the camera. So here we go. All right, so this character, I tried to make the character as realistic as possible. I used MakeHuman as the actual software, and I've been using MakeHuman much longer than I've been using actual Blender, because I learned 3D to some degree on what is known as Adobe Dimension, and then eventually I built up the courage to move on to using Blender. And actually I use this other software known as Vertex. It's a 3D software package as well, and you can do very similar stuff that you can do with Blender, but it's using a web browser based 3D software development tool. So once I learned those two, it was easy for me to learn Blender. I just had to figure out the viewport. And once I got into the viewport, it was like pretty much a matter of time to figure out everything else. So this is my character. Obviously it's a female, as you can see. And if I hit the play button, you'll see the animation that I built into it. It's realistic mouth motion and facial gesture, stuff like that. So I did that myself. There was no mocap software connected to a webcam or anything like that. All it was me moving the bones on the face. And my technique is very simple. All I do is use the play button and the auto keyframing, and as I've shown y'all folks, by moving a bone or two, you get the mouth motion, and then you can also get expressions to be created. Now the only problem is that creating actual lip motions to lip sync on someone's speech, that's something that I'm not able to do at this current moment in time, because obviously I don't know what a person is going to say and how they're going to say it and how they're going to gesture it. So I probably would have to mirror and map off of somebody's um, maybe like audio file or something like that and listen to it and try to map it. But that would be very, very difficult. That's why people use what is known as motion capture software. And also Blender has a motion capturing software built into it, or VFX software built into it, where you can do different things. So I learned how to use that, but that is a little bit difficult in terms of how to map out the face properly and to get it to work. And some people have figured out how to make it work, but for me per se, it doesn't provide the best results. Now I did find a way to use an iPhone X, and you can use the iPhone X to tie in what is known as animation nodes. What it does is it literally mirrors what keyframes can be, not keyframes, mirrors what do they call those things? Not keyframes. Kind of forget. I'm having a brain fart at the moment. But let's see if I can go into it. I just have to click the skin, go over here. Shape keys, that's what I meant to say. So it literally mirrors what shape keys can do. And what shape keys do is store the motion data of certain vertices. So you can use vertices, create a change in the shape and volume of the vertices and the contours of it. So what I mean by that is, like, let's bring up the actual the lines and the graph and stuff, and then we're gonna go from object mode to edit mode, and now you can see the vertices. So how a 3D object works is basically these little dots called vertices and faces, as well as line segments. And in a computer graphic design, that's how they were able to create 3D objects. So they use these little, it's almost like pixel points, and they connect them through graphical, I don't know exactly how it gets connected, but Blender is programmed to make these vertices connect to each other. And then they allow you to overlay and tie in materials and assets onto it. So we can tie different material graphics and make it have a sort of contour and shape and design that resembles a human and stuff like that. So that's how pretty much 3D graphics works. You can literally go inside and you can see the tongue. You can see the eyeballs, the back of the eyeballs. This character looks like it has multiple eyeballs, which is not right. I don't know how that happened, but that could be just a glitch in when you go to edit mode, pretty much. So some of this stuff does have glitches and stuff like that because it's experimental, so it's not going to be exactly the way it's supposed to be sometimes. So when I go to edit, it shifts the position of where the eyes should be sitting at and the head, and that's probably because it was animated from its original position. So now I went back to the timeline, to the 0 position by hitting the rewind, and now you can see the eyeballs is in the correct position. So when you hit the play, it's going to change the positional orientation. So when you hit the play, you see the eyes moving, you see the head moving, or the bones I should say, but the physical head is not going to move because it's actually being edited. So let's go back to object. When we're in the object mode, if I select the eyes, you'll see the difference. Now the head's going to move. So we go over to edit mode and hit the play, and now the head will move. See, so that's kind of weird, right? But this is the kind of stuff that you learn about using Blender when you're experimenting, and then you also learn how to troubleshoot stuff and to figure out why some things are not working, why certain things are working. All of this is without having the knowledge of code. So I'm not using any codes to do this stuff. I'm just experimenting on 3D objects that I see on the screen and clicking stuff, selecting bones. Like right now I'm selected on the facial bones, and the full armature. So this is the full armature that's tied to the body, and all that could be constructed by an animator or somebody who's learning how to animate and how to create. But you don't, like I said, you don't need the bones in order to animate stuff, but bones will help you to animate multiple limbs and animate facial features and things of that nature. Now, with the use of shape keys, y'all folks should need to learn about shape keys. If you're brand new to animation, shape keys is what really can take you to the next level with animations for facial structure and also other body parts. Maybe you want to bring in a weapon for a game character, things like that. Using shape keys can help you to do more than just using an actual armature with bones. But some people prefer to use the bones to control, the facial structures and stuff like that. I like to use shape keys, and with using MakeHuman gives you the ability to apply shape keys onto your character without you having to do it yourself. Generally, shape keys will be something that you have to build in yourself. So you have to go to this. Once you click and select the mesh, the 3D mesh slash vertices of the character or the object, you have to go down here to this option here in the properties that says object data properties. You can select other ones, but this one is for the object data itself. And then in the lower portion of it, under the vertex groups, you have what is known as shape keys, and then you have to program your shape keys in. And now, if you don't know how to do all that stuff, you can basically look up on Google and on YouTube and learn the background to what shape keys are, because this is not the only 3D software where shape keys are applied. Pretty much every 3D software that has animation in it will generally have shape keys if you're trying to animate the face. So that's something that you'll learn over time, and you'll start to adapt to it and start to understand it once you understand the basics to it and how to create them. It's, like I said, it's not hard. It's very simple. I mean, you create a basis, you hit the plus. It starts with a basis, and then after that, you hit the plus again when you're in edit mode. And in between edit mode and object mode, basically, you can change the shape and contours of things based on vertices. So you can take the vertices and start pulling them and pushing them. You can do what is known as proportional editing and get the shapes to morph and change positions, and it will lock into whatever shape you chose it to lock in. And it has a slider that you can get, a value slider, and you can move it from 0 to 1 or a little bit greater than 1 or less than 1. Or less than 0, I should say. Depends on what value you choose to set it here. And it will show that the actual object is morphing from one position of shape to another shape, which you can use actual cubes. You can use any kind of shapes, 3 object shapes that you want. And this is the kind of stuff that I learned as well. And once you learn that stuff, then you're able to play with the tools a little bit further with animation, and you can apply that to, maybe you want to create like a film project, a short film, animated film, or stuff like that. I haven't really created one yet because my computer freezes too much, and every time I try to render, I end up having issues. So that led me to learning shortcuts with rendering as well for animation, and a way for me to be able to create animations without having to go with the long method, which is to try to create the full animation 100% all the way. So I can show y'all folks some tips with that. You go to render, you go to render animation. If you do it that way, straight up, without looking at your settings, what that's going to do is going to render to the defaulted state that Blender has set up from scratch. When Blender first is downloaded on your computer, it's going to all have default settings. So in order to learn that stuff, you want to start to get into rendering. So you want to type onto YouTube, render animation, or render animation how to, something like that. Or go onto Google and type in Blender render animation, or animation render. And when you type in those type of things, you start to find videos, and you find documentation and information on how it works and what the information is related to it. But pretty much, if you watching my video, live streams, or whatever, I'll try to cover a little bit about it of what I learned. So pretty much, you go down here when you're in the properties area. See, it says up here, the top toolbar has tweak, options, transform, effect only, whatever. You can bypass that and just click the second one, and you'll see it says render engine. So right here we're in the scene option controls. So we're controlling the scene. So we're controlling everything that's in the viewport for the ability to render. So you can do sampling for render controls. Right now I have my render set at 1. So with Eevee, Eevee is an actual render engine. We have multiple render engines. We have a workbench render engine, and we also have a cycles render engine. I highly recommend for y'all folks who are just brand new, learn Eevee first. Start with Eevee because it's very simple. It gives you the best render quality in terms of your computer being able to output it fast and real-time rendering. So it's basically giving you a real-time render. So you're getting to see what it's going to look like in real time. So that's what it is right here. In order to do that, you have to go up here with this shader option here. So this is your shader, your viewport shading option. You have to go to the far right and select that. If you don't select the far right tab, you're going to be in a different option. So right now I'm in material preview, and this is Blender 2.82. So if you go back in previous versions of Blender, it may be different. Now I'm in what is known as the solid view, and now I'm in what is known as the wireframe view. You can change these views if you want. You click this down arrow and you can play around with these options that you see here. So you can change that. Like right now I'm in wireframe object, wireframe random, changing the background to world, changing the background to viewport. Keep playing with this stuff, manipulate this stuff. You can play around and do different things. So you have X-ray, you have outline. What's the difference? Well, you just have to keep playing with it just to see the difference. You click here, select a color, you can get an outline, things like that. That's all through playing around and manipulating. Now going back to render, now you see I just went over here to the far right. Now we're in the rendered view. So in the render view, now you're going to see the full scale of what you're looking for visual. So the full visual on it. So that's that part with Eevee. I'm rendering at one because we're using Eevee and it's putting less pressure on my actual GPU. So my graphics processing unit is not being pressured that much to render right now with a render sampling rate of 1. If you move the sample rate to like 100, 200, 500, 1,000, things like that, especially when you're in cycles, it's going to take up much more GPU and it's going to take a long time for it to render. And your computer, if it's not that great at graphics and great at processing in general as a CPU, it's basically going to freeze over time. It may freeze up and then you're going to have to reload your computer, reboot it over and over and over again. So this is the kind of stuff that I experienced, and it's really unfortunate because a great deal of stuff I could have covered and helped a lot of people to learn over time if my computer didn't freeze so much. It's a deterrent for me, and the only solution to it is to upgrade the computer and go to next levels of having higher level graphics cards, high level CPU, stuff like that. And I mean, your computer's hard drive is really not going to play much of a factor in this unless your hard drive is very, very small. And I have a terabyte of space on my computer, pretty much, well, a little bit lower than a terabyte, but it's pretty high, so that shouldn't affect anything. So that's my recommendation. Set your render to 1. So you can change this by selecting it here. Let's change it to 10 or whatever. 10. Hopefully the computer doesn't freeze, but yeah. See, you can change it. So let me change it back to 1. And then another thing with rendering, you want to go to the very next tab under. Let's not go under that where you have other options to change ambient occlusion, bloom, depth of field. All this is more advanced stuff. You don't have to do any of that. You could just leave it as set at default. So let's go to the next tab under, and that very next tab is where you can actually direct where you want your render to go to. So render, you kind of could think about a render as an output. So you're creating an output of your graphics that you want your computer to store somewhere. So you want to store it maybe on your hard drive or external hard drive or maybe a Google Drive or some sort of drive in general. So that's where this secondary tab comes in. Now over here you have all this dimensional stuff. You can leave it defaulted, and this is generally going to be defaulted to your computer's screen. So whatever screen size that your computer has, it's going to be set up based on the resolution and aspect ratio of that. And then render region, you can leave it defaulted there. All that is preset for you to have the best possible resolution based on your computer settings and your actual graphics card settings, as well as what is set up for your actual, if you have a TV that you're using, widescreen, flat screen TV or whatever, or you're using a monitor. So whatever the sizes that you have preset for that, it should automatically be set for it. If it's not set for it, you can check, go back to your computer, hit the right click select button on your mouse, and then go to display settings and check your display settings to see what is set up at. So my resolution is 1366 by 768, which is recommended. So you can go back to Blender and see if things is set up to that degree. And mine's on Blender is set at 1920 by 1080, which doesn't affect anything, doesn't cause a problem. So I leave it like that. But I can change this to the screen size dimensions that are set here. And that's a recommendation sometimes for, you know, say you're having issues with freezes, crashes, things like that. And all kinds of different things can be causing issues. Definitely, most definitely when you're trying to render. So say you wanted to render out, like I said, the output. This is the output option here under the stereoscope. I don't really know what stereoscope is. I'm not really sure too much about the time remapping. Frame rate, you can leave that defaulted, but that's basically what it's going to store as. So when you do all your keyframes and timing and stuff like that, if you change this FPS, it may actually make it faster or slower. So I don't think you want to change it too much. Just leave it defaulted the way it is until you start to learn this stuff and get more advanced with it. The frame start and end, that's the same thing here where you see start and end, and that's pretty much set up for your animation. And then step, I really tried to play with it one time, but I'm not sure what this benefits you as and does in general, so I'm not really too sure with that one. So I would recommend for you to leave it. And then over here where it says output, you click and select this option in the very far right, which is a little folder icon. When you select it, it opens up a pop-up screen for Blender's file viewer, so you can go and you can send your render to a specific file folder on your computer. If you don't have a file folder for it, you can use this create new directory, and you can actually create one. So you just hit the plus or this folder with the plus on it, and then you create a new directory, call it whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna call this one whatever, and hit enter. So that creates a new folder / subfolder on your computer's hard drive, and then you double click it, and that will be that folder that it's going to send it to. All you have to do is click accept, and now you are actually going to be rendering out to that particular folder. To check and verify where that folder is, you go into your computer, go to the folders on your computer, and you check where it is. So mine's is actually through my 3D objects main folder, MakeHuman subfolder. Where did I put that thing at? Now I did kind of forget. Oh, China. I think it's China animation, and there we go. So you see it says whatever. Now as you can see, we have some keyframes already built in, and this is how the animations actually work depending on what you want your setting to be here. So under it, it says file format PNG. So that's what I have here. All these are PNG clips. So when the animation runs, remember I talked about the 0 to whatever number that you saw. I think it was like 161 starting out. So here goes the 0001. When I said to start it at 1, that's the 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frames, 4 frames, etc. So this is how it starts to take these little image clips. So when you render out, when you hit this render and render animation or Control 12 on your keyboard, let's go back. It's going to render out tiny clips, just like a a flip book. So when you're using a flip book to create animations, I don't know if you ever created animations with a flip book. You can take like a little small amount of paper and just draw little things on it, and then flip it real fast. So when you flip it, you'll get the actual expression of movement or whatever you want out of it. So let me just make this a little bigger so you can see. It's kind of hard to see. So let's go to manage, go to view, and go to large icons. So now you can see the facial expressions actually change over time for each frame that is selected. So if I move it, you'll see that it's moving. See that? Pretty cool, right? So I'm just scrolling with my mouse so you can see the change in time. It looks like it's talking and moving its head. So that's kind of like Flipbook right there. So that's what Blender does. Blender basically will take all those keys, all those keyframes, and it will send it as an output on your computer to the specific folder that you chose to send it to. So once you do that, now you can redirect how you want that to be utilized. So one of the tricks that I learned about with rendering, if you render as a PNG or a JPEG, you can choose and select what type of render output format you want it to be as a file format. So you can go where it says PNG, you select that, and you can choose JPEG if you want it. And then it will send out as a JPEG file type, which is an image file, and it will look exactly like you saw here. It will have all these here. The difference is when you release your mouse after hovering over it, instead of it saying PNG file, it's going to say JPEG. And the dimensions that you chose to select for the output, it's going to be that dimension. So mine is 1920 by 1080. Obviously the file size would be pre-selected by Blender, so you can't choose what file size you want it to be. It's going to do it on its own based on what you chose to create. So say I wanted now things to show up in here. It's already pre-configured to show up in the whatever folder. And now say I wanted to just render out 10 frames. So I go from, say I wanted to go from 20 to 30. I can designate here where it says start and put 20 and go to end and put 30 and hit enter. So now it's gonna pretty much send the 20th keyframe to the 30th keyframe by rendering the animation out, and you'll see render animation, and it's gonna go in and it's gonna do it, and hopefully the computer does not freeze, but you can see the freeze frames here. As you can see, the face is moving and it's taking screenshots of each one. So now we're done from 20 to 30, and you'll see in that folder, that whatever folder, from 20 to 30. So there you go. So hopefully this helps y'all folks to go a little bit further from the basics of animation to learning how to create your own animations. So another thing with this is that the benefits of storing it as graphics, as little image graphics, PNGs or JPEGs, you can take those, and I created a really dope a file. I created a Blender file for the actual function that I want to show y'all folks. So what you can do is go to File, go to New, go to General, go to Don't Save, and what you can do is you can create the video sequencer. So you open up the video sequencer, go all the way up here, and you can go to Add. Actually, let's turn the viewport into the video sequencer, make this the timeline. With Blender, Blender's so dope in terms of customization, so you can really customize any of the locations on Blender on the screen how you see fit. So we're going to take this and turn it into the video sequencer. So now the viewport is no longer accessible. I can't do anything with the viewport in here. I just want to play with the actual clips that I created, the little images. So what I'm trying to do is turn those images into a video pretty much, and then I want to animate it. So how you do that, you open up the video sequencer, go to Add, and then you add Image Sequence. So you go to Image Sequence, And I watched a video about this, and that's how I learned how to do it. So it's not like I knew how to do this on my own. I learned how to do it by finding a YouTube video, and I forgot exactly which one, but eventually I'll show y'all folks again how to do this in a separate video, maybe a pre-recorded one, and a one that's detailed and segmented to this particular solution. So what we're going to do is try to find that folder. So we go to documents or whatever, let's back up, go to 3D model, or 3D objects I should say, go to MakeHuman, go to China, animation, and the whatever folder. And now what I can do is hit the A key, that selects all of them, and then I can go to add image strip. What that does is it adds it as an image strip here. Now this is like using a flip book, like I said, and I can take that and I can animate it. So I can go to render and render animation. When you do that, it actually takes each of those and it renders it, so you can get the output of the render. And let me hit the X. I forgot I want to limit it from 1 to 20. So I want to make it a 20 frame animation. I forgot to do that. So it would keep animating all the way to 250 because that's the default set for start to finish or start to end. So let's go to render animation, do it again, and you see up here it says frames. It's going to render all those frames, and I don't know why I put 20. It's supposed to actually be 10 frames. So we're going to hit the X, and we can play that animation. I believe the animation was sent to that same folder. Now the problem is that I'm getting duplicates because I screwed up. Actually, let's go to 1 to 10. Made a little error there. What you have to do is turn it into an actual video. So right now I'm sending it to a temp folder, which is not good. The reason why it defaulted to temp, the TMP, is because when I went to file and I went to open and opened it as a general file, it got rid of my configuration and my settings for the settings that I had in my last previous session that I was using on Blender. So I have to go and I have to change it once more and send it to the folder that I want it to go to. So hit the back, go up, go to whatever folder again, hit accept, and then I have to also change the file format. So let's change the file format to an actual movie file format. So now we can change it to a FFmpeg video file format, and that format works with a lot of my players, so that's why I set it to that. If I set it to AVI, it would have to be an Apple type of player, Apple Mac computer type of player, and I don't have, I think I have one, but I don't like to use that one. But if you don't have one on your Windows computer, you're gonna have to download it, and it probably won't work the way that you like it. I'm not sure. So what we're gonna do now is render out again, render animation. Now what you're seeing here, this is the render preview. So this is just showing you what it's gonna render. It's not the actual render. Now we're gonna go to the file folder and find it in the whatever folder, and it's shows here as 001 to 0010. So that's the 1 frame to 10 frame. You right click it and then you go to play, or no, you go to open with, and you choose and select what type of player you want to play it with. I'm gonna try to play it with Windows Media Player. Hopefully it plays out. Sometimes it may not want to play it because the file format is not recognized by that particular player. So mine's actually worked, and that's pretty much it right there. That's all it did, 0 to 10. Now if you're having issues with rendering, this is the solution. It will bypass the freezes and stuff like that you would probably have if you're trying to render in cycles and all those kind of things, and you can actually create your short film, but you would have to go at small little segments, so like 0 to 20, maybe 0 to 30 each frame segment. So 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, etc., etc., until you fill out the whole entire animation time frame of your keys. Oops, made a little error right there. Go back to Blender. So that's pretty much how you would do it. Now, I created, like I said, a separate file. So let me see if I could access that file, which pretty much eliminates all of these tabs that you see. You have all these other tabs in the top, and I think these tabs will actually potentially slow down your computer because it takes data to render them onto the screen. So let's go to File, Open, don't save, and we're going to try to find that folder that I created. So let's see. I don't know exactly where I put it at. Maybe an animation? No. Let's see. Animate. I think in here, in animate. Yeah, so it's this thing called animate any PNGs. So that basically what it does is it brings up what you just seen. So we're gonna go to open, and this is the only thing that's in here. We have the layout and we have animation. So what I'm gonna try to do is create a blend file and probably put it on like a GitHub location or something like that for people who want to just get this particular access to this file. I don't know. I'll try to figure out how to get this out there for folks who are brand new to Blender, so they want to pull off, say they wanted to pull off the same thing that I was able to do. It's a quick way to do it, just to get that blend file and then load it up whenever you need it, instead of having every single time to go and open up the sequencer and to get rid of all of these tabs and do all of that. You can have that file straight up on your computer, and then boom, you're able to create those really, really quick. You can actually do it after the fact of creating your separate Blender whatever project that you try to create or whatever. So say I had this China thing set up and I have all these animations on the screen, and it's just so much stuff going on, and I want to get rid of this so that it doesn't freeze my computer when I try to create the the little segments. So what I can do is render out, do render animation as PNG like I talked about. So you check, make sure everything's set up. You output it to the right file folder that you wanted it to go to, and you leave it as PNG or JPEG. Once you've done all that, you can exit out of Blender, or you can go to File and go to New, go to General, make sure it goes back to the original state, previous stated condition, and then or you go straight to Open, and then you open up that file folder that I told you about, or that file itself. So you go to animate any PNGs, .blend, open, and then bam. Now you can start from here and go to add, go to image sequence, and then find the animation that you want to put in. Very simple, very straightforward, and it will work to your advantage if you do it that way. If you want to deselect something, you use the shift key, and I believe you can select it. Hold on one second. Nope, it's not allowing me to do it. I did it before, shift select, and then it made it disappear. Well, you can actually drag and select like that, so you don't have to use the A key. So say you didn't want to select one of them or multiples, you do it that way. You can drag, so use the shift key, drag and select, and then that allows you to grab the actual images that you're looking to grab instead of grabbing everything that's in that folder. And there you go. Very simple stuff. At this point, I'm going to end this session because I have some stuff I got to do. But hopefully y'all folks were able to learn some stuff from it. And I'm going to do some more videos in showcasing how I was able to create that facial motion. A lot of that is very simple on Blender as well, like I showed y'all folks and I was talking about. Let me load it up again. Go back to Black China. And in this mode, you can see here, you can see through the bones and everything. So say I wanted to control the eyes. I just grab these controllers here, or these bones, and then make sure the pivot point is correct. So you have to remember what pivot points that you have set. I think it's going to be medium point to rotate it, and no, that one's not right. So let's try active element. Nope, that's not right. Oops, that was a little error. Let's try again, individual origins. And I made a little error right there because now I'm out of pose mode. There we go. Okay, there we are. So it's original origins, and now I got the eyes moving. Let's go into render, and now you can see the eyes will move together. See that? And if I double click, usually you can make it move. Let's see, double clicking. I'm trying to get it to free up the rotation so I can rotate freely. Instead of horizontal and just vertical, it's free rotation. So I kind of forgot how that happens, but let's see. Yeah, it's not working. Okay, it's all good. I'll do some other videos on that just to show y'all folks once I figure it out. But yeah, it's really fun to be able to manipulate and play with the differing poses and positions and things like that. Look at the eye. Ugh. Playing around with the eyeball. So yeah, that's why I like to use MakeHuman. MakeHuman really makes it easy for you, and it frees you up from having to do all the rigorous stuff of creating the bone structures and having to create the vertices and create the whole entire 3D object. You don't have to do all of that. It actually creates the character for you. You just basically do some screen sliders, slide stuff in positions, and then go to town with whatever armature that you created off of it, and be able to create your animations from that point and have fun with it. But other than that, this is your host, Mike Pugh, signing off. Hopefully you learned some stuff from what I've been able to learn over the course of time. I've been on Blender, using Blender for about a year and some change now. Going on maybe a year and a month or so. And it's been a great experience so far. Hopefully y'all folks were able to benefit in some way from whatever I was able to offer up today and in previous sessions out here on YouTube. And I'm glad that I was able to go the full course, because sometimes, like I said, my computer freezes and I can't make the full video without having errors. But thanks a lot for all of those who chose to watch. Joe Love and peace to all. I do apologize for not communicating on it. Let me see if people got any questions before I leave. I'm actually on the live session and I don't see any comments, so that's okay. That's cool. I'm able to go freely without having to answer any questions. But other than that, that's all I got. Feel free to smash that bell icon out of the universe if y'all folks want to get my latest videos, and feel free to subscribe if you're brand new to my channel. I like to do this. I like to have fun in a very different way and play around with, most definitely using Blender, but other tools as well. Whenever I find something that's useful and I want to learn how to use it, I try to apply my skill to it, whatever I've gained in the past and present, and try to input that onto the screen so folks can see what I'm able to do with it. And I highly recommend for other people to do that stuff, and don't forget to have fun while you're doing it. Other than that, I'm out. See you next time. Peace. Let's see if I can get out of here with ease. Here we go. Hit the end stream and we're out.